everyone, welcome to another episode of AI Spotlight Show, where we spotlight different companies that build different kinds of AI solutions, be it AI solution to help optimize business process. And today we're looking at another aspect of AI solution, which has to do with AI security. As you all know, in some of our subsequent interviews, we've talked about some AI-induced risks, like some machine learning adversarial attacks. And today we'll be featuring a company that have been able to build a robust solution to help identify some of these adversarial attacks and how you can build an AI solution which can be able to detect some of these solutions and to make it easy for you as an organization. And today we have the CEO and the founder of SenseOn, and his name is David. Hi, David.
Thanks, David.
Welcome to the AI Spotlight Show. Yeah, can you tell us about SenseOn, or what motivates you to come up with this company?
Yeah, Henry, first of all, thanks very much for the opportunity for coming on the AI Spotlight Show. So yeah, I'm the founder and CEO of SenseOn, and essentially what we're building here at SenseOn is what we call like an intelligence cloud. So it's essentially a security data lakehouse that takes in a very wide range of data from companies' existing security tools, telemetry we generate ourselves, cloud data. And what it's trying to do is to make sense of these billions of data points in order to tell people what they need to know at the time they need to know it to protect their business.
Wow, that is really amazing. Can you tell us what year you founded this company?
Yeah, so I began building SenseOn back in 2017.
Okay.
But we have a very ambitious vision. Like it took probably 2.5, 3 years of building like the data pipeline, the data fabric that feeds into the intelligence cloud, before we even began selling. So very heavy R&D, inventing new ways and new concepts to do cybersecurity at a scale that's going to be required in the future. And of course, a lot of AI research to make sure that we were able to make sense of everything that we sensed across large enterprises.
Wow. That must be an every task. I'm trying to imagine the numbers of hours that you must have committed, in building this solution. Then, I don't know if you feel comfortable to answer this, but in terms of starting up a company like this, I know it requires huge financial, investment. But in terms of the funding, did you have to go to the venture capital? Did you start with your own personal fund? Do you want to share that story with us?
Yeah, exactly. So everything starts out as an idea and a passion. That's the first thing. Right? You've got to really passionately believe in what you're doing. And so, to bring that idea to life, I bootstrapped it initially because my background was in government and the military doing cyber operations. And so I was teaching running courses how to run cyber operations, which then gave me some early capital to bring the idea of the intelligence cloud to life. And then when I had my first few customers, then I went out to raise venture capital, raised about $30 million so far for SenseOn. And exactly as you said, when you're trying to really introduce a new vision of unified security operations, that requires a lot of R&D. And so venture capital is one way to be able to fund that new research and development.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm so happy to interview you that you were able to bring this idea into realization. And I can also say that a lot of organizations are actually leveraging your technology. Then in terms of company presence, can you talk about where you guys have presence? I mean, are you guys just in the US, or do you have presence in the UK or in Europe or in North America? Where is your major market focus?
Yeah, so we are a global business headquartered in the UK with a team in Australia, Japan, and in the US as well as the UK. And we service customers across the globe, right? So we protect some of the largest ports in the Caribbean to critical national infrastructure in the UK and in the US, to Fortune 1000 companies, there's some of the world's largest banks. So,
wow, that is amazing.
Financial services, manufacturing, retail are our main sort of sectors, I would say. But broadly, it's like any business needs to make sense of all of this data that producing, which is increasing on an annual basis, right? And so Yeah, so like it really is applicable to many different segments.
Now, if just a quick follow-up question. Since the company has been in operation, can you give an estimate of how many customers or clients that you guys have so far?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, like we've got like I said, like customers all over the world. Many of them are like globally distributed, so like FTSE 100 companies, Fortune 1000 companies, and like I said, yeah, like there's like mainly financial sector is probably our biggest sector, and the reason why is because they're often like compliance heavy.
Yeah, yeah.
They've got a lot of regulations. And they're normally in like what we call like the mid market to the mid enterprise.
Okay.
But what we are seeing is, of course, like this increasing demand for even SMBs to be able to protect themselves, because the consequences of an SMB getting severely hacked can be catastrophic for the business, and so to do that, we work with a range of partners worldwide to be able to bring the power of SenseOn's intelligence cloud to the SMB space as well.
Wow,
so, yeah.
that is amazing.
Yeah.
Then I know you mentioned Japan, and I want to know, was that a strategy to select Japan as the country that you guys, will focus on from the Asian region? Do you have more customers in Japan, or what's the strategy behind that?
So like actually we got customers across Asia, especially in the big finance hubs like Hong Kong, Singapore, lots of customers in Australia as well.
Okay.
But also what we have is, so we really like to talk about outcomes, right? And so when we talk about like establishing a good cybersecurity strategy, it consists not just of technology, and we're obviously like a product-based company, but also consists of processes and people, right? So you got to consider all those things. And so for many of the companies I was talking about, even for like the larger companies, actually a real problem in the industry is like a talent shortage. So like it's only really like until you get like the Fortune 100, Fortune 50 that they've got like really large security teams.
Yeah.
A lot of companies themselves, or maybe have teams of 5 and less. And so they rely on companies like us and our partners to deliver a service on top of our technology. So you're getting the process and the people and the technology, And so actually like our teams across the globe deliver this like follow the sun managed service, and like really the space that SenseOn sits is like this convergence of XDR, SIM, and managed services. Only because those 3 categories, if you like, there's huge convergence, but it's all delivering the same outcomes, i.e. keeping companies safe, keeping companies resilient.
Okay, that makes sense. Bless you. I have a quick question. In terms of this solution that you guys are, platform you guys are building, how can you describe, companies leveraging your platform in order to mitigate various forms of anticipated adversarial attacks that may arise as a result of implementing machine learning solutions or AI solutions? Can you say that your company or your platform has this robust solutions to be able to manage any form of anticipated, attacks? I'm talking about the adversarial attacks and different kinds of threats that come as a result of implementing artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so I like to talk about our architecture of the intelligence cloud in 3 layers. Just conceptually, it tends to make sense. The first layer is the data layer, we call it. And the reason why I talk about the data layer first is it's incredibly important in order to deliver the outcomes that you want. So like the quality, the consistency, and the timeliness of the data that you put into the pipeline has a direct correlation on the quality and the consistency of the outcomes that you get at the other end. And so we spend a lot of time on working on our data fabric that combines identity, endpoint, and network information at source in order to like run the next 2 layers on that I'll talk about in a second. And so the reason why I focus a lot on the data is because traditional security architectures, just because of how the industry has evolved, has been often thought about in silos. So, you look around this massive hall at RSA today, there will be endpoint vendors, there'll be cloud vendors, there'll be network detection and response vendors. But what that leaves in a sort of like tapestry of security architectures is gaps between each one of those. And the very good attackers will exploit those gaps.
I agree.
They're not natively designed to talk to each other, which is why we really concentrated in our data fabric in unifying that data source. So that's the first thing. That's the first layer, the data layer. Very important. The second layer is what you do with that data, the analytics layer, okay? The agentic AI layer, okay? And what this does is essentially is like, how do you apply a very wide range of analytics, machine learning, behavioral, more rudimentary pattern-based analytics to produce insights into that data? And then how do you feed that into an AI layer that begins to make sense of, in a reasonable size environment, what are tens of thousands of alerts essentially. And the reason why it's very important to get that layer right is its impact on the third layer, which is the human layer. Per man or woman who is taking the output of those alerts. And if you don't get this middle layer right, it's impossible for humans to analyze tens of thousands of alerts. So you've got to make it much more simple, much more consumable. Now, my mom, when I was growing up, told me the story of the boy that cried wolf, right? The first time the village came running, trying to rescue, the shepherd from the wolf eating its flock. It turned out to be a Jew, right? The second or third time they didn't come running. The same principle applies to security. If your security system is constantly telling you false alerts, no matter how disciplined you are as a person, Henry, it's the fifth time, it's the 10th time, it's the 50th time I've seen that alert today. You're not going to be investigating it as diligently the 50th time as perhaps you would in the first time. So that's why these second two layers must work in harmony. The AI and analytics layer must package the alerts in a way that looks after the human layer and is cautious, that is intelligent enough not to let the human characteristics be exploited by the attacker in the first place. Because that's what we see, right? Like, if you go back to the SolarWinds attack, which was an attack back in 2021, where the attackers got into the environment and they just didn't do anything for 2 weeks because they knew in the distance and time between them first getting access to them actually making the next move, there would have been so many alerts. They're hiding within the noise. So just to recap, 3 layers: data layer, very important to feed the second layer, which is the AI and analytics layer, which is incredibly important to get right to make sure that the human layer, the response layer, is looked after well. Make sense?
That really makes sense. And as you were talking, a lot of things were popping in my head, and I could relate it with different concepts. Now, when you mentioned the data layer, I was trying to see how that fits into the AI life cycle. Now, in the AI life cycle, the first phase is where I call it the business problem identification, where you identify what business use case, how you want to leverage AI. Then the second aspect is called the data preparation, planning, and cleaning. And at that layer has a high potential for threats. Then the architecture of that layer, because we know that the performance of AI machine learning is dependent on the quality of the data. And that is why I agree with you when you talk about the solution that you guys built are hinged on 3 architecture, 3 layers. And I like the solution of the data layer itself. Then the other one that I also kind of agree with is the human factor and the human layer. And that actually correlates with what we call reinforcement learning from human feedback, where you involve human in terms of checking the performance of the AI output itself. And you could actually call that like an human oversight.
Yes.
And that is what
human in the loop is what we call it.
Human in the loop, yeah. Which is the same like reinforcement learning from human RLHF, or human in the loop. You understand? Then I kind of agree with that. But the second layer you talk about the AI or machine learning data insight or the analytics. Are you talking about a dashboard where you are able to see the performance of maybe the data itself? Because there's something they call the data report insight, EDA, explorative data analysis. Now, your explorative data analysis is a report that gives you the status of your data, where you're able to measure. I mean, you talk about quality, you talk about timeliness. You understand?
Yeah.
Then, from your explorative data analysis, I can have a very good insight into the data. I could actually predict if the data could do well when I train the model or not. And with that, I could also define what would be my training data, what would be my test data, right? Then that is one aspect of AI insight or analytic insight. Then the second aspect of it is when the model has been trained, you could have a dashboard that shows you an overview of the performance of the model itself. You understand where there are different, will I say, threshold or parameters that you can use to measure the performance of the model, right? To see the performance of the model to know if it's in good shape, right? Maybe your model validation as well. Now, where does the data and insight layer, where does it, can you explain that in details based on, the background I've been,
Yeah.
seeing so far?
I mean, you've touched on like so many aspects in
Okay.
that is actually especially important in security.
Okay.
So security is an industry, right? It's built on
Yes.
trust and credibility.
Yes.
And so the openness and transparency of how the AI is thinking essentially
Yeah.
is incredibly important to share. Not just the fact that you need to have a human in the loop to like validate the performance,
Yes.
but like just like it's to build that confidence and trust in like how the machine is performing.
Okay.
And so within SenseOn, we do this in a number of different ways. So
Sorry to intercept you. Where the data insight you're talking about, where are you pulling the reports from? Where is the source?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it
yeah.
from the training of the model? Is it from the phase where you're trying to clean the data, prepare the data? Tell me where that's.
So
Yeah.
the
Okay.
first thing is it cannot be a black box solution. So the concept of black box solution, it just sort of outputs things, but you never know how things.
Okay.
So that was one of our design principles from the beginning. So all our customers get access to all of the raw data coming in. So they can see, like, it's not uncommon for us to be ingesting like 50 billion events in like a 30-day period in a customer. They can go to any single one of those, query it, and see the exact stream of data. So they can validate it. Then now that is like the raw data layer. But then what gets more important is when that begins to get analyzed. And so we actually have a separate database in SenseOn that we call the experience database. And the reason why we call it the experience database is because an early algorithm we designed was what we call a root cause triangulation. And it was actually based off some early research that came out of the US military that analyzed, it was a psychoanalysis of how human analysts think and act when they're investigating an alert. And so there's a process that human analysts go through. And what it is they'll see an alert. In their mind, depending on their experience, they'll form a hypothesis. So, hey, this looks like command and control. That's my hypothesis. And then what they will do is they will take actions to confirm or deny their original hypothesis. And depending on what they see during those actions, they'll either update their hypothesis or they'll confirm it. Now, we were able to enshrine that algorithm in code that constantly works under the hood. And so that's where the experience database comes from, because every time a new alert comes in, it looks back over the experience database and it updates the accuracy of the hypothesis, and that's why, like, across our whole customer base, we're able to produce alerts that only have a 9% false positive rate. So it gets it wrong only 9% of the time. Now, to compare that to industry standards, it's like often 90% plus of the time, So you get like a sort of like 10x improvement in accuracy by this constant learning process of looking at like the hundreds of thousands of alerts over time that are coming in, being analyzed, and being built into these attack paths and being assessed every time a new alert comes in.
Wow.
And so the customer gets access to all of that learning. And what I can actually see is when the system automatically downscores things based on its experience. And so, like, because it's a dynamic learning environment that's constantly adjusting as like new data comes in.
Oh, that really makes sense. Yeah, but are you guys looking to build, will I say, an AI security solution that will be tailored towards monitoring the performance of the model. Yeah, are you guys working towards that?
Well, yeah. So, like, essentially, like the vision is this security intelligence cloud, right? So, like the fact that ultimately in the future, like if you were to track the exponential curve of data produced, adopted, and consumed over time, like it's going for like it's basically increased like 10x in 10 years, right? So like around about in 2025, estimated to be 187 zettabytes of data being produced, adopted, and consumed in the world, which is insane. So the problem facing companies is how do we make any sense out of all of this data we're producing, adopting, and consuming? And so you need to leverage the power of cloud. We need to leverage the power of AI to be able to do that. So that's our vision, is essentially this intelligence cloud with AI agents that are working 24/7 on your behalf to surface these insights
Yeah.
that allows you to keep your business safe, allows you to grow your business safely, allows you to move fast.
That makes sense. While you were talking, one of the, will I said, most likely risks associated in the data preparation phase is what we call the data drifts. Now, how does I know you've been able to break down the architecture. The reason why I'm mentioning this specific concept is because of our audience. Most of our audience are some are PhD students, some are also industry professionals, and they are kind of familiar with certain terminologies. Then, how does your platform, I mean the data layer, helps to handle data drifts like more efficiently?
So I guess if you mean data drift, why like data being fuzzy over
Yeah.
time. Well, what we actually do, there's a number of there's two key timestamps that we use to be
Okay.
able to like track that. So it is the time observed. So like for example, we deploy what we call a universal sensor to people's like laptops, devices. So the first timestamp that we record is the time that the data was observed.
Okay.
Then the second timestamp that we record is when it gets ingested into the intelligence cloud. And so then we can track the difference between those. Now, we've got, like I said, 1,500 customers, Fortune 1000 customers with a global presence.
Okay.
So then what we've got to do is to make sure that the timestamps are all aligned to UTC, say, for example. So like there's a single unified master timestamp to coordinate all of this analytics in the back end. So yeah, that's how we do it. We essentially like record when the data is observed on wherever it is observed, record when it's ingested so we can see any delta between the two and we can take account of any drift that causes.
Wow, that is really making sense. Then my next question would be, as a CEO and as a founder, right? How were you able to manage scalability in terms of business expansion? And that is one. And along the side, how were you able to keep up with innovation? As we know, the world of AI is evolving.
Oh.
Then those two things might be difficult to keep up with. Business expansion now, a lot of people know about your products. There is a lot of, will I say, success story about the product. And how are you able to keep up with that expansion and also keep up with innovation as it
And
evolves?
it's a great question. And I guess the first thing we were, I guess, lucky, I guess maybe we had an inside track in these things, that our vision really, we were front running the market quite a bit. I was talking about like this concept of intelligence back in 2017 where security was very siloed, very fragmented. And so I remember having a conversation with like the senior guy, I wouldn't name in like a very large bank going, no, Dave, we'll always want best of breed on endpoint, best of breed on network. And I was like, we're going to have to agree to disagree because what I'm seeing in the strategic trends of data being produced, adopted, and consumed, the advancement of the threat, the complexity of the environment is you will not be able, let me put it in the language of the head of a SOC of a large insurance provider. He said, Dave, it's like doing the world's most difficult jigsaw puzzle, but there's no picture in the box and there's loads of pieces missing. So we were sort of ahead of the game in this vision where like ultimately to really make sense of it, everything that people are sensing, you're going to need to unify this in an intelligence part. Now, unify does not mean like completely consolidate. Large enterprises need a system that can integrate tightly with their existing tools,
Yeah.
but it needs to be intelligent enough to be able to do that and not have an impact of like what we often see with legacy systems: high noise, very expensive, requires lots of manual engineering to sort out. So how to be able to do that in a simple, agile way for the future. So firstly, I think we were building with like a 20-year horizon in mind. So like I think if you're going to found a company, any of your like PhD students that are listening, who are sort of very well placed to do so, like be ambitious about your vision and anchor that vision of strategic trends, i.e., the data being produced with the consumer, the advancement of the threat, the increasing fragmentation and complexity of the enterprise environment. If you can do that, that's a pretty solid basis in which to solve the asymmetry of being a relatively small company at the beginning, especially when you're going, it's a David and Goliath story to a certain degree, right? So you've got to think about how strategically you can load the dice in your favor. And essentially what you're looking for is an idea that is ambitious, but also known consensus. So like I said, like people, you've got to have people telling you, oh, this is never going to work. Yeah, because it's that known consensus aspect is what then allows you to make that leap forward in and imagining like a future that like other people can imagine.
Yeah, I agree too. Yeah, I guess that's a brilliant response. Wow. Now, can you talk about how the company kind of expand in terms of employees?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the company's strengths. Then how do you guys, will I say, in line with how business was expanding? Do you want to talk about that,
Sure.
historic growth?
It's quite interesting, right? Because like we've been around for 7 years, and I think if you go back to like if we divide that in two halves, the beginning, like like the sort of flex was like how much money you've raised, how big you are, you know what I mean? How many employees are you hiring like this week? And what we've really seen, and especially the last couple of years, is that flex has completely flipped, to like it's how efficient are you as a company?
Yeah.
How much you leveraging AI, how cost effective are you guys, and so like and that's what like SenseOn, like where we really like essentially been an AI company from the beginning. Like we've leveraged automation to scale beyond our means globally.
Yeah.
Like in a highly efficient and cost efficient manner. So we raised like $30 million, but like we are like a profitable company. And so like that is and to do this while still investing heavily in R&D, like that's important because like every like penny you spend on like superfluous thing is not a penny going towards R&D, and so like I actually think like it's looked at somewhat through a different lens nowadays in terms of like cost efficiency and growth to enable deliver efficient business operations and excellent customer service.
That's amazing. Then, what is your strategy in terms of keeping your employees and also believing in your vision as a founder?
I mean, like it's the single most important thing, right? Like that you've got to create a life-changing opportunity for the employees, and they've got to share your passion. Like my background is military, right? Like you don't join the military to make lots of money. You join because you're passionate about helping people, right? And to a certain degree, like I get the same sense of mission at SenseOn as I had in the military, and like to be able to defend and protect companies like large enterprises around the world, but even to like the smaller like companies who do not have the internal expertise or perhaps resources to protect themselves, to be able to really convey the importance of that mission is like incredibly important to be able to like fire the employees because and you were talking about like the journey that we've been on it, this David and Goliath journey, it's not a 9 to 5 job. You need people to go above and beyond. You're working weekends, you're working late at night, and so you need that passion, you need that belief in the mission, and the employees need to have like a life-changing opportunity, quite frankly, to come do something they're passionate about, but have a potential, like I said, life-changing outcome for them and their family.
Wow, that's really amazing. Then I think I have two more questions. My other question will look like, how were you able to, will I say, remain competitive in the market? Because I believe you have competitors, and I believe there'll be a time that some of your existing customers might like, oh, this person reached out to us,
Oh
they
yeah,
offer
yeah.
this kind of services. Then how were you able to convince your employees, no, I mean your existing partners or clients, in order to remain competitive or to have that competitive advantage?
So it comes back to what we're talking about when you're thinking about setting up a business. Like,
Yeah.
what's the known consistent idea? What is the idea that you believe? What's your,
Okay.
like Steve Jobs famously had this like reality distortion field,
Yeah.
right? And having a bit of a 20-year vision to deliver on this like new reality.
Okay.
And what that then does, should you begin to distort reality the way that you see the future, is it begins to be what people refer to as technical moats,
Yeah.
and so it's actually those foundational technical moats that are hopefully predicated on strategic trends that aren't going anywhere in the industry that allows you to be defensible against probably much larger, much more well-funded competitors. Now, don't forget, you're the speedboat, you're the super tanker, so you can like continue to pivot and innovate much faster.
Yeah.
But I really think it's very important to have these foundational, non-obvious, non-consensus principles that you're building your future vision on that allows you to get an early head start to like quite large technical modes. And for example, with SenseOn, it really is like the quality and the consistency of our data that then feeds into this, like the sort of data fabric that feeds into the innovation in AI for the intelligence cloud. Like those are two very large things for competitors to overcome.
Is your company looking to expand to other markets,
But yeah, like we're all
other region where you don't have presence? Yeah, like Africa and other parts.
yeah, exactly. So like we're always open to like channel partners across the globe working with us to continue to expand our services, continue to deliver our products to like the furthest reaches. Like I say, everywhere from Hong Kong to the Caribbean to South America to like Europe and London, we've got partners, and so yeah, we're always very interested in that.
Okay, great. My last question: what are your three takeaways from our audiences?
From our say, key takeaway from
Yeah,
Mars.
three, yeah, three
Well, I mean,
yeah.
it is the world's biggest cybersecurity show. So, firstly, it's a pleasure to be here, talking to customers, talking to prospects, talking to the community, because the strength in the community is it's a team effort. Cybersecurity is a team sport. So, being able to like speak to fellow founders, speak to fellow defenders, listen and learn, as well as like contribute to like the thought leadership in the community is always something I look forward to the most. And it's I always walk away from like this, like I said, the largest gathering in the world with this reminder of just how much of a team sport cybersecurity is.
David, thank you so much. This is an
Henry, it's a
incredible
pleasure.
interview, and I feel honored to interview you. Everyone, thanks for your time today. I believe we've learned a lot, and I think the next phase of the interview will be bringing one of the solution engineer, which will be a virtual interview, to do like a product demo so that we can see some of this product live. And also, we also look for an opportunity where SenseOn can provide an opportunity for those who are looking to go into AI cybersecurity. And if there is any other career opportunity too, we are going to stay in touch with our HR team. Thank you for joining another episode of our AI Spotlight Show, and talk to you guys soon. Do have a good day.